And we are live. Cool. James, how are you doing?
I'm good,
I think
thanks. How are
that
you?
before the stream, good. Before the stream, you made a Matthew McConaughey impression that I actually thought was not shabby. Do you wanna repeat that?
Would you get demonetized? Has he been able to copyright his all right, all right, all right?
Oh my
Might be
god,
something where
I
he
hope
has
not.
intellectual property rights over that.
I don't know.
Yeah,
This might count
I'm
as
not good.
parody
I'm not
law.
good. He's so iconic. Everyone knows exactly how he sounds, so it's hard to, especially as a Brit. Like I it's not an accent that I have grown up with. Who is the what's the name of the guy that played Cyclops in the X-Men movies in like the early 2000s? Richard, is it
Oh
something?
gosh,
Can't
is he
remember. But
British?
he does an amazing impression of Matthew McConaughey, and he's got like a story about him on one of the talk shows. Yeah, he does an amazing impression. Yeah, James Marsden, that's who it is. Yeah.
Oh, he was in 30 Rock for a while.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember what talk show he was on, but he was like some story about Matthew McConaughey. He does a dead-on impression. There you go.
Excellent. I'm bookmarking this. I'm also gonna. Oh yeah, one thing. I was showing James around the Stream Manager. Uh, I get to post in the chat with like special fancy permissions. Y'all are seeing my Stream Manager. Cool. Oh yeah,
Nice.
another thing. Um, Another streamer, a popular guy by the name of Ben Myers, has this cool thing. Show my chat. So in the stream, I have this little embed that shows all of our chats. So on YouTube, when I upload this to YouTube later, and then next year when I start live streaming also to YouTube, people will see the chat.
Nice.
So you see it there in the stream.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah,
Cool.
nice.
All right. Yeah. So that's my calendar. Love these little things. Yeah. So
Redacted,
I
redacted.
figured, yeah, I'm gonna blur that out in iMovie later on. Um, yeah, so we were talking about two things for the stream. Originally, the point was setting up NX, which we can get into soon. I figure we'll talk for another maybe 5 minutes as people trickle in. But also, we were chatting about making a TypeScript ESLint logo. And my first instinct was, well, the first instinct I liked was to put like the ESLint logo inside the TypeScript one. But you had a good suggestion of what if we did the other way around? What if we put the TypeScript logo inside the ESLint one? What do you think?
Yeah, so the current TypeScript ESLint logo was essentially the opposite of this. It was the TS logo, but using the ESLint colors. And this is kind of flipped where we're using the TS colors and the ESLint logo. So it's just the exact mirror image. So I was suggesting that I think we have the blue, the TS blue isn't iconic enough in isolation, and I think we'd benefit from having the TS in there. So one way to do that would be to have it inside the kind of white space created by the middle chunk. And there's a bit of precedent there as well, because the Angular ESLint project that I created, thanks to the community, we have a logo which looks quite good, which has got the Angular shield embedded in the kind of empty space in the middle. Obviously, we've kept the shield shape in that case, but it kind of keeps the ESLint like logo in there, but it also then it uses the color of the tool that's being combined with the ESLint. So it's a similar kind of precedent, I think, and I think that Angular ESLint one the community member created looked quite good. So it doesn't have to be like the whole thing doesn't have to be the shape, but the other one you had where it was like the background square, I was thinking the TS could live in the empty space in the middle.
The void,
Yeah.
like this.
So not
I
exactly
actually
like
kind of
this.
like the
I meant
sounds.
as in like when you were on the page, like it's hard to describe where you were before. You had the starting point was a blue like yeah, exactly this one. So if the TS was in the kind of inner white, but that was like still the style. So it was kind of still the TS style with a big block of blue, and then the TS was just sort of carved out of the middle of the inner white is what I was visualizing. Maybe that's too
Yeah.
nested. Maybe that's too crazy.
So like there are a few options here.
Yeah.
We could have the whole where's the I have a version of this where it's all cut out. Here we go. We could have like this logo. The simplest would be I think the white background in the or the white shape in the TSLint color. Um, ugh, where's the you know what? Close enough. That's it's been a while since I've used Photoshop. I'm a little rusty here. But here we go.
Yeah, I can't really help you, I'm afraid.
I know I should be using Figma or any of the other modern tools, but gosh darn do I like Photoshop. Brings me back to my high school days.
Yeah.
Here we go. So that's one option, give or take.
That's
so
one option, yeah. And then you could have the same thing, but keeping the multiple shapes, like having that inverted TS, but cut out of the inner white instead of filling in the whole hexagon with white. That'd be another option.
Yes. I'm gonna put that and call that one A. Oh boy. Here we go. Then here's B, where we don't have, oop. Oh geez. This gets convoluted. You don't realize how convoluted visual design gets until you have to actually manage it. It's like code. There's so many edge cases.
Yeah, it's just way better to get irrationally angry at people for their job and not understand how it works. That's how we usually work on both sides of the fence. Come on, this is it's just a button. Like, why can't you add this thing to it? And both sides of the fence are like looking at each other blankly.
You're not hardcore enough as an engineer if you're struggling with this button here. Okay.
Exactly.
This is just a draft. I'll have to play around. But is this what you're talking about as like the B, the second level?
Well, that's the third one. To be honest, I was thinking of the inverted, the blue TS inside of the inner white. So having the two different white shapes. And maybe that does look too congested. Maybe that is too nested. But your original starting point of the ESLint shape with the outer white, the inner white, I was thinking of having the kind of blue TS just in the inner white.
Just in the inner white. I don't know.
Your starting point, you had there's an inner, like.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's hard
like this
to describe.
I'm sorry, I don't follow.
No, so do you still have your starting point? The start like just where you started the stream with the ESLint shape in its original unmodified state. You had two. It has two different white pieces.
I'm just gonna go right back to the start. I forked the document. Now I'm gonna not save, and I'm gonna reopen the same thing. Ooh, I kind of like where that exploration is going. Okay, I had this on another laptop, and now I'm switching over to. I hate Mac's UI so much. I think this was the one. So one of these fellas.
That one.
Right now?
Oh, there's a bit of a lag. No, so not that one. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag. So I'm saying that one when it's not the same moment. Yeah, this one where you've got an inner white. I was thinking the TS in blue cut out of like TS basically in negative space within the inner white only.
Got it.
So it might be too much. It might be too nested inside of too many things. But that is what I was referring to. So cool. The TS was the same color as the blue backdrop, and it was just sort of carved out of that middle white.
Oh boy.
The reason for instinctively thinking that was maybe that made it more like the ESLint logo. Like there wasn't any mental leap needed to see the ESLint logo in it. But again, maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too many shapes, and the TS is too small in the middle, for example. I don't know.
That's a great set of explorations to do. Also, we have a chat. Hi, Sleepy Time Baby C. We're great. We're prototyping a new logo for TypeScript-ESLint. Oh, I kind of like this. How are you doing?
Yeah, this is what I was imagining. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What I'm imagining is we can make these as like ABC variants and then talk about it internally, and then eventually post up a Twitter poll with like 6 different options across 2 large styles. Why am I not able to open? There it is.
We should probably run some of it by DALL-E as well, like create get the AI to generate a logo for us. It'll be so complex and so esoteric, and it'll go in all kinds of crazy directions we won't expect.
I did. Oh my god, I'm so excited about it. Did you see Beyond from Sourcegraph posted that actually on Twitter? It was not great what Dolly came up with, but it was actually a humorous, I think, misinterpretation of what we meant by cross. These are actually not bad logos though on their own.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm not super familiar with Mid Journey. I had no idea. I had no idea you'd written this on Twitter. So no, I hadn't seen this. I genuinely didn't know somebody had tried it on AI. So yeah, Mid Journey. I think I've seen John Lindquist post about Mid Journey. I've never used it. I've only used DALL-E through OpenAI. But I guess Mid Journey is another AI generative art thing, is it?
I guess so.
Those don't.
I thought Midjourney was about for Dolly. Yeah, this looks like, I can't tell if it's like a youth pastor's logo or like a heavy metal group's sarcastic youth pastor logo.
Yeah. Or it does look like maybe
yeah.
like what Stephen King novel. It'd be the kind of like iconography that would be of some kind of fascist organization that springs up. That's like a fictitious fascist organization, like the what was it, the United States of Britain in V for Vendetta, for example. Like a lot of that kind of iconography looks like the top left quadrant to me.
Definitely, yeah. Strong agree there. So great.
So,
as a side
probably
note,
not that.
Yeah, probably not
idea.
When you post, we really need a logo on Twitter. I forgot this is a thing that happens. You get a whole bunch of replies from people offering to make you a logo, and also a whole bunch of DMs from a whole bunch of people for asking about if you want a logo. It's not good. Right. So would not recommend.
Yeah.
But cool. Yeah. It's 10:45. James, I feel like it's a good time to start the actual content of the stream, which is coding stuffs. How about you? You feeling good?
Feeling good. 7:45 p.m. I'm in my local time. So yeah, I'm feeling good.
Excellent. You're in Dubai, if I remember right.
I'm in Dubai, yeah. Yeah, the United Arab Emirates. Today is the 51st National Day of the United Arab Emirates. So for most folks here, it's a public holiday today and tomorrow, 4-day weekend. But for those of us like me who consult with other countries, it's not a day off today, because for me personally, it doesn't make sense to align myself with the local holidays when my customers are not in the same time zone, so in the same holidays schedule. So, but yeah, today is the 51st anniversary of the country of the United Arab Emirates, which is kind of wild to be in such a young country. Last year obviously was a big deal with the 50th. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm used to the United States being called young because we're only a few hundred years old. That is very different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But cool. You want to tell us who the heck are you? Who are you, James Henry?
Why do I deserve to be here? So my name's James. I've been making things with computers for quite a long time. I started when I was about 12 with customizing my MySpace profile. That was how I literally started, with changing things on the web, hacking away stuff I didn't understand. And I bought my first PHP for Dummies book. That was how I got into programming in the first place. Last kind of 10 years have been all focused on Node.js, really. So using JavaScript across the stack. So I've done a little bit of Go and a tiny bit of Rust and stuff like that, but predominantly I'm a JavaScript guy. And when the Angular team back in whenever it was, 2013 or maybe 2013, started exploring like a major rewrite of Angular, they were going to do it in this thing called @script, and it was going to be this custom compiled to JavaScript language. It was going to have decorators as a first-class system. And fortunately, the TypeScript team were very keen that the Googlers didn't make something incredibly similar to TypeScript, overlapping enormously with it, but slightly different. And instead, Google and Microsoft partnered together to make TypeScript better so that it was good enough to use instead of creating a brand new thing just for Angular 2+. And so as somebody who was writing web apps for a living in AngularJS, this was something I was following incredibly keenly. And as soon as it became clear that TypeScript was going to be the choice for Angular 2, I immediately started using TypeScript for everything I possibly could. And so we're talking like 2015 time. And it was still pretty rough around the edges back then as well. And it was a major departure from the JavaScript world, namespaces and all that kind of stuff before we had ECMAScript modules in the mix. But I really just loved having that extra expressiveness to say, this variable, I expect it to hold a number, not a string at any point. Please protect me from myself because I'm not very smart. And I fell in love with TypeScript for that reason almost immediately. The one thing I didn't love was that I was going to have to give up my linter, and my linter was ESLint. And so I really didn't like the fact that I was going to make this effort to improve my feedback loop, but then I was going to switch to an inferior linter because TSLint was playing catch up and didn't have half as many features as ESLint. And particularly at that time, it just wasn't something that you could swap in and have the same experience. So Nicholas Zarkas, the creator of ESLint, was mindful of the fact that TypeScript was kind of bubbling away in the background and growing in popularity. So he set up a little prototype of an AST transformation. So what if we could pass the source code with the TypeScript compiler and take the AST that it produced and map it from that TypeScript flavored AST to an ESLint flavored AST, so that it can conceptually, you could use an existing ESLint rule on some JavaScript syntax that was passed by the TypeScript compiler. That was as high as the bar went. It was nice and simple. That formed the seed of a repo called TypeScript-ESLint parser, which I maintained on the ESLint team. Then he set up that prototype, and I took it over because he personally wasn't interested in TypeScript. Like he still to this day, he's not somebody who writes something in TypeScript as far as I know. So I took over the prototype, and it became my obsession to make this an actual thing that you could use. And so I basically never used TSLint with TypeScript. I just kept making this better until I obviously was familiar with TSLint, and it was a great source of inspiration for early rules, particularly. But I just worked on this until it made sense. And I was on the ESLint team, but all I was doing was TypeScript ESLint parser and the corresponding ESLint plugin. So it didn't really make sense for me to continue on the team, but only be focused on TypeScript. So I suggested that I spin out TypeScript ESLint parser, combine it with the ESLint plugin, and create a new project called TypeScript ESLint. And we brought it together under the same umbrella. Brad had been contributing to the ESLint plugin, and so he joined in immediately with the monorepo, and the rest is history, really. We kept iterating on it for a good number of years, and then kind of got caught off guard when the TypeScript team declared that they were going to use TypeScript ESLint on the TypeScript code base itself. That was a major milestone and step change, because not long after that, the Palantir team that was maintaining TSLint decided they would archive the project, deprecate it, and then eventually archive it. And so TypeScript ESLint just grew and grew and grew, and is the only real solution now for linting in TypeScript projects with any kind of power, because people often get confused about linting and stuff like that. There's two very different cases. There's being able to parse a file and do some AST assertions, and then there's type-aware linting that is much more advanced, requires knowledge of the TypeScript compiler, requires it to be available at runtime for you. TypeScript ESLint is the only option for that. Like you can look at some of these Rust tools that exist. None of them take into account type-aware rules. They can do AST transformations super fast, but it's not the same thing that's being discussed. Anyway, that's a tangent. But yeah, so that's me. That's what brings me here to Josh's door, because Josh was one of the people making TSLint better and better and better over time. And when the TSLint project naturally wound down, Josh has been invaluable at building out a bridge between the two worlds, TSLint to ESLint config. We brought that under the TypeScript-ESLint umbrella as the only real other repo under our namespace, because obviously we built everything in the mono repo up until that point. And this gave Josh a nice little self-contained corner of the world to work in while he was transitioning. I mean, you could cover that if you wanted to, what like your focus at the time. But I'm delighted that not too much later, you were very happy to join in on the main mono repo and contribute more broadly. Like I remember at the time you wanted to just sort of be focused on the one thing, but obviously the great thing is that you've helped countless people move from one to the other thanks to this tool. And I built Angular ESLint's conversion schematics around this tool to make it possible for Angular folks to move from TSLint to ESLint. Because to be honest, that was the single biggest community around TSLint, because Angular was so early adopting TypeScript. It simply wasn't possible for them to use anything other than TSLint, because I hadn't made TypeScript-ESLint good enough yet, or we hadn't, Brad and I. And so, the contribution you've made has been invaluable, and we now work on TypeScript-ESLint together. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
It was very long and rambly, but that is all the information anyone needs to know.
No, that's great. I see a good question in the chat, and I will get to that. Fun fact, we actually have an issue about having a history of the project somewhere, which I'm going to eventually work on. Here we go. So this is actually really useful. Brad posted some text, and this is just something on my plate for this month. Hi, Ryan. History. I'm just posting everything in the Twitch stream chat.
Oh yeah. So actually, but I've just seen one of Brad's paragraphs. I glossed over a hugely important milestone as well. So as you can see, in 2018, Prettier was gaining huge popularity, and I was like, an AST-based thing that is expecting an ES3 flavored AST, but we work in TypeScript, so we have a different AST. There's a precedent here. I have built an AST transformation thing, and so I separated out basically the core of TypeScript-ESLint parser as it existed at the time into a generic thing, which is called TypeScript ES3, which literally just takes a TypeScript AST, turns it into an ES3 flavored AST. And that was all that was needed really to facilitate Prettier being functional on TypeScript code. And so I created that package, and then I did a PR into Prettier to hook this up. And then community members on the Prettier side took it over to actually add the pretty printing, because all that meant was that was then functional. But obviously people had to come in after that and decide what's the prettiest way we can print a generic with 4 type parameters, like all that kind of stuff. Obviously it's just subjective. It had to be decided upon. So functionally it was all up and running. So that was another huge milestone for the overall project, was being able to facilitate Prettier TypeScript support, because before that Prettier could not support TypeScript. These days, now that Babel is an alternative TypeScript parser, you can also support Prettier through Babel TypeScript support. But at the time, it was just a fact that Prettier could not support it. So that was another huge milestone for us, was to be able to use our project to benefit Prettier. Even to this day, we get massive reciprocal benefits from that, because the Prettier devs are really good and really active, and so often there'll be a feature that comes along in TypeScript and they want to be able to pretty print it, so they'll help us get the support in TypeScript ES3 to be able to pass it so that they can then pretty print it. So that was another very important milestone for everyone.
Yeah, that's great.
And as we've alluded to a couple of times, the Brad, who's not on the call with us, is just the hero of the project. He's kept it going single-handedly at various points where I've dealt with personal issues, and he's done an amazing job. He's been operating at Meta for a number of years, where he's been working on static analysis through Flow and TypeScript and ESLint and various things. So if you don't follow Brad, if you don't know Brad, please give him a follow. He's definitely worth Checking in on. He's back in Oz now. He's
Yes.
a native Australian. He was in California for a long time, but he's back in Oz.
Here's his website. Yeah, I actually want to ask a couple follow-ups there on ASTs and the like, but I do want to get to tell me how to pronounce this. Elxfaz? Elx? I don't know how to say that, but great question. How do I find the courage to contribute to an open source project like TypeScript? I would love to have any open source contributors take a look at TypeScript or us on TypeScript-ESLint. I'd say if you want to contribute to open source for the first time, I definitely Eliphaz, thank you. I definitely recommend something like the Good First Issue services. For example, goodfirstissue.dev. It can be, you get a lot of support if you go to a big project like TypeScript or React for the first time, but it can also sometimes be a little easier if you go to a little smaller of a project. So if you, let's say you want to do something in TypeScript, you can search here and you can find issues that are tagged as good first issue. In general, repos tend to use the good first issue tag, so I definitely recommend there. Finding repos that tag things as good first issue is great because oftentimes they will have explicit stuff set up to make it easier for first timers. Like this one actually looks great. So I'm just gonna go ahead, goodfirstissue.dev. Another thing I'll note is whether it's your first time or not, even if you're a repeat contributor, a lot of repos, I posted it twice. A lot of repos will be very supportive and helpful. I think that's something they should do. So if you're scared, if you're worried, will this make me look bad? It definitely will not. Everyone understands open source can be like challenging. It's you putting your stuff out on the internet, and maintainers, at the very least, all the good ones will be very supportive and understanding and try to help you along. So just do it. Asterisks, smiley face. James, anything to add on that?
One thing to bear in mind around things to approach, try not to bite off a huge feature or a rewrite of something. If you're intimidated by contributing in general, ease your way in gradually, I would say, because sometimes on the flip side, if you're a maintainer and you're trying to keep the project going and you're pouring a lot of your heart and soul into it, if somebody comes along out of nowhere and does a huge pull request, which changes loads of things, and it's not been agreed upon in advance, and it's not been discussed, they have to spend time. Obviously, if they do a good job, like Josh said, of being empathetic and wanting to help, they have to then spend time reviewing something they've not been expecting, and so you set yourself up for success by putting yourself in the mindset of the maintainer as well, thinking this is somebody who's working for free in their spare time instead of spending time with their family. Like, how can I make it easy for them? So even if, so good first issue is obviously perfect because you've picked something that they've already proactively identified as the right ballpark for you to contribute to. But if you were on a repo where you, for example, you loved the project and you wanted to give back to it, maybe the maintainer didn't have the bandwidth to create such issues, which are marked with good first issue, but you really wanted to contribute to that one. I would suggest start with something small. Maybe it's even documentation stuff, because that's more likely to be easy to review. It's more likely to get accepted, and it'll give you that confidence. Then once you've got a few PRs under your belt, a few back and forths with a maintainer, you'll realize that it's not so scary, and you get a bit more comfortable with it. But if you go too big too soon, you're more likely to end up maybe slightly annoying somebody, and then you'll think, oh my god, I'm not cut out for open source. This is not good. So that would be a real shame if you lost confidence by maybe biting off more than you could chew in that initial couple of PRs.
Definitely. I made that mistake early on. I thought, oh my god, I want to be a real open source person. I should contribute huge features to be impressive. I'll be a real a real boy. Starting off with documentation fixes, little bug fixes. Definitely, most repos have some kind of process where when an issue is filed, we will first triage it and then mark it as accepting pull requests. So definitely, if they have a system like that, try to look for ones that are accepting PRs, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing a good job of advertising, contributing to us, because we have quite a good, mature system set up for actually being clear with our communication about what's clear. So you won't experience this everywhere. This is something that we've evolved over years of trial and error, because it's sometimes very hard to be an open source maintainer as well, in terms of how do you communicate effectively to people you'll never meet in real life and that you don't know who they are and all this kind of stuff. It takes time to figure out a system that works on both sides, because as much as I just described an unlucky situation, if you do a big PR that changes stuff and the maintainer doesn't want it, it's important for maintainers to, in that moment, be like, okay, so what can I do better now to set up guardrails to stop these interactions from needing to happen in the first place? And so that's some of the stuff Josh is highlighting, is a lot of the hard work he's done to try and make sure we've got clearly documented processes, and we use labeling as much as possible to communicate intent very clearly. So yeah, that's something that takes evolution, and we're lucky that TypeScript-ESLint has been going for many years now. So we've evolved that process, whereas other newer projects, there'll be some amazing devs working at light speed, but they might not necessarily have spent as much time refining their processes. So that's something else to bear in mind.
Yeah, that's been a big focus of mine for a little while now, that I want us to have good processes. That's why we were going over the branding stuff before the stream. Like having a well-defined repository or set of repositories with good contributing, good first issues. I've even been documenting our maintenance flow for whenever we hire or take on a new maintainer, like we did earlier this fall. I guess it's already the winter. Earlier in the fall. That's really good stuff for repos. And actually, that's a great segue to one of the things you, James, were working on was NX. Before we go on to NX, I wanna define terms, because I know there are folks who are joining the stream who might not be familiar with things. So the two main names, acronyms, abbreviations we're going to be going over today are ASTs, which we've mostly finished, and NX. I don't want to spend too much time on ASTs because it's kind of not what we're talking about today. Right now on the TypeScript-ESLint website, if you do want to know more about ASTs, there is an explainer, which I'm posting in the Twitch chat. This is actually going to be moved soon on Monday to a docs page blog post in our blog, but there'll be a nice redirect, and the blog post actually has more information. So this explains what an abstract syntax tree is. It's basically a representation of your code that other code can logic over. But yeah, James, you work on NX. What does that mean? What is NX, and what are you doing with your career?
Yeah, so if you could open up nx.dev, it's a great domain name, nice and short. So this is our documentation website. It's very pretty. As you can see, we have a lot of very impressive customers, but essentially, historically, the brand that we've used for consultancy is Narwhal. Although I'm pleased to say that Narwhal's just raised $8.5 million for the first time, taking outside funding. So we are going to be focusing on the NX product very heavily, NX Cloud as well on top of that. So NX is our open source MIT licensed build system. It's smart and fast and extensible. And so this is an amazing tool to use in any kind of repo of any size. Although its origins, because the two co-founders of Narwhal are ex-Googlers, where famously almost all of Google's code is in one mono repo, one repo with all the different projects together. NX's origins are in facilitating JavaScript monorepos at scale. So we have first-class monorepo support, but you don't necessarily have to have a monorepo to use NX and get value from NX, because it's got a ton of amazing features around code generation, which we call generators. So if you're setting up a new project, you want consistency in your apps. If you've got 5 apps in a repo, you want them all consistent. We have an intelligent core, which handles running tasks, so running scripts, it may be in multiple projects, and it has a powerful hashing mechanism inside of that, so that it can determine if it should actually do that computation. If you say you want to run some unit tests, if you wrap the unit tests in an executor, as NX calls them. So maybe your executor is the jest executor, so you're going to run some jest tests. If you do NX test, that will invoke jest, and your unit tests will run using the jest test runner. If you run NX test again, nothing's changed. And NX knows that. NX will check the hash of the source files that are relevant for that computation. And it knows that the hash is unchanged. So it will run and it will instantly unpack that from the cache and show you your terminal output from Jest exactly as you would have seen it before, but nothing happened. So in a couple of milliseconds, you got the response. So NX is able to do that generically. The core of NX doesn't care about any particular ecosystem like Node or React or Angular or anything like that. It's just this. Victor, the CTO, likes to describe it as being like VS Code for dev tools. So VS Code is a code editor. It knows how to traverse your file system, to load files, to interact with them, and stuff like that. All the power of VS Code is then layer on top that's specific to different program types. So the TypeScript stuff, the JavaScript stuff, the Rust stuff, whatever, that gets layered on in the form of extensions in VS Code. It's a similar case with NX. So NX is smart core for task running and building a project graph, seeing how the different projects fit together and how the dependencies between them. All of that is generic. It doesn't care about what you're doing with your code. But then you layer on top of that NX's plugin system. And so you can have presets for Angular apps or React apps or Node libraries or NPM libraries and all these kind of things that you'd want to do. So we've got all the kind of dev tools you'd expect: Jest, Vite, Webpack, Angular, React, Next.js, Nest.js, Node, Express. We've got plugins for all of those things. And then we have a great community as well. If you're on nx.dev, there's a community page which shows a load of plugins that the community maintains as well. So the plugin is a first-class primitive in NX. So like I say, a lot of them are powered by the Narwhal team, the NX team, but the community has and does build plugins as well. So things like Ionic, native scripts, those kind of projects have been maintained by those communities outside of the Narwhal team, and it all works very, very well. So what you're currently showing, NX Cloud, is a product that is built on top of the open source MIT licensed toolkit. It's a hosted backend service, which, as I mentioned, when you run certain commands like building, testing, linting, those are deterministic. If nothing about the source files has changed, you don't need to rerun that computation. You could restore that from cache. So NX Cloud has two functions. It's a remote cache, meaning if I don't have a copy of the cache on my local machine since a particular computation was run, I can pull that data instead from the cloud. So I can benefit, for example, if my CI program, if let's say GitHub Actions runs on the main branch and it builds all my projects, when I clone the repo and I run NX build, I will benefit from CI having run that and populated the cache already. If I don't make any changes on the main branch, I will just hit the cache. But I won't have that cache locally if it's a fresh checkout. I will instead hit the remote cache and pull it from there. So that's hugely powerful because it means that team members can benefit from the previous work, not just of themselves on their own computers, but their colleagues' computers or CI. So hugely, hugely powerful feature of NX Cloud. And it's free for almost everybody. You get 500 hours of utilization per month for free. So it's effectively free for everybody. It's enterprises that pay for it because they will self-host it instead of using the SaaS model, and they pay a license fee for that. So the other feature of NX Cloud is what's called the distributed task execution. So when I described running NX Test, NX-Lint, these are all generic concepts. NX knows how to run these so-called targets. It doesn't care what they do. So like I mentioned, you can have an executor that runs Jest behind the scenes. You can have an executor that runs Webpack behind the scenes. But the NX core just knows how to delegate to these executors. It doesn't care what they do. It just knows how to hash things, to communicate with the executors, take the results, cache them, restore them from cache, all that kind of stuff. So what that means is because that's entirely generic and because it knows how to organize your project into a graph and organize your targets, your tasks, your scripts into a graph as well, it can take that information and generically, without needing you to tell it, it can take those tasks and run them across multiple machines simultaneously. So you run what's called an agent. You have a main job that coordinates everything, and you have a series of agents that are waiting for instructions. And so let's say you have testing and linting and building. If you set up 3 agents and you say on your main job, NX test all the things, NX build all the things, NX lint all the things, the cloud, the NX cloud, will say, aha, you've got 3 agents and you've got 20 tasks to run because you've told me you want to lint and build and test. I can see there's no relationship between linting and testing, so I can run those in parallel to each other. So I will schedule those across your 3 agents in parallel, and you will get the results exactly how you would have done if you'd run them one by one. You'll see all the terminal output captured for you. And I will run them in parallel and then fan back in again to give you the results. And so if something failed, then your job failed. But if it all passed, it passed. That is an exceptionally powerful thing to do. It's an exceptionally difficult thing to do by hand. This so-called bucketing or partitioning of work on CI is something that's a game changer for repos as they scale in terms of the amount of projects they have, the amount of lines of code they have. But trying to get it right by hand is not only very difficult, it's very fragile. It's something that you have to keep updating over time as your repo grows, because your initial partitioning of work will get stale, it'll get out of date. Whereas because NX understands your repo and your tasks that you need to do in a truly generic way, all of the syntax you write in the actual CI file doesn't need to change over time. It doesn't need to evolve. So maybe you could, if you visit Narwhal, there's a repo on the Narwhal organization called CI, this is a GitHub workflow that I created, which is extensible, so you can use it. If you scroll down to the example usage, it helps reduce some of the noise. So this is one using a GitHub action, a GitHub reusable workflow, and you can see it nicely abstracts away all of the kind of the noise on GitHub Actions sometimes of having to set up your yarn install, and you have to do caching with yarn and all the rest of it. So this action just nicely takes in a set of commands, and this is how simple it is. So you run nx affected lint, nx affected test, nx affected build. Those commands are going to be kicked off at exactly the same moment. NX will figure out, is there any interdependency between these things? So for example, in some cases, you might have tests that depend on your build having already run. It's not always the case. Some people pull in their source code directly. They don't rely on a dist directory or something. But in some cases, you need that to have happened. It doesn't matter. You can still tell NX immediately run build and test, and it will be like, oh no, but I know that you need to run build before test, so I'll do that. So when it schedules that work across the agents, it will run linting in parallel with everything, because that's not blocked by building or testing, and it will run build first, and then once it's done building, it's eligible to run testing. And that is not even necessarily, it doesn't need to be universal. It doesn't need to be that every one of your projects needs to build before it tests. It might be only one, but it knows those exact relationships. So it can schedule the work as efficiently as possible. If only one of your projects needs to build, it can schedule the test tasks in parallel with that first build. And then only the last test that relies on that build needs to come at the end. So again, doing that by hand is unbelievably difficult and fragile, and would require GitHub Actions or Travis or Circle configs that are hundreds of lines long. Whereas this is how terse it can be using this reusable workflow. As you can see here, we infer what you want to do with npm install or yarn install, pnpm install, depending on your workspace. So this nicely shows how conceptually simple things are without noise of install commands and caching and whatever. The great thing about this is you write your commands exactly how you would have written them if you wanted to run them one by one. And they just magically don't get run by one by one. They just get scheduled intelligently. So it's hugely powerful. There's no special source. There's no special syntax you need to learn for running on CI. And that means your mental model doesn't need to massively change. You would run NX affected test, NX affected lints or whatever locally on your machine to run the affected tests and lints for your changes that you've made locally. So that's a really powerful thing. So yeah, that's NX Cloud. It's both a remote cache location for you to hit if you don't have a local cache populated with something that already exists, and it's also this really intelligent distributed task execution brain that knows how to schedule this work and communicate with multiple agents across multiple machines simultaneously.
Awesome. That's a great segue because we have an issue on TypeScript ESLint where we want to set up plan to continue onboarding to NX. Before I go into that, I do want to note in the chat, not related to the discussion, but I have been thinking about creating a dev-oriented Twitter account for quite a while from Sheepy ABC. Yes, I agree. It does seem like there's a healthy dev community on Twitter. I agree. It would likely be a good idea to join it. You don't have to join Twitter to be a good dev or involved in the community or whatnot. And in fact, I am worried that Twitter won't exist in a year because Elon Musk is doing a terrible job as CEO. But a few short thoughts from me. If you have the emotional bandwidth to deal with people on the internet, which for me comes easily, but others may not, I definitely recommend. If you don't, maybe try it out and don't worry if you delete it. A lot of people have gained a lot of benefit from Twitter. I personally have seen my career go way farther than I ever thought possible, in large part because I'm active on Twitter and talk to dev people on it. So definitely recommend Twitter. And if there are any, one quick pro tip is, if there are any projects you use, definitely follow anyone who works on that project on Twitter. For example, if you use TypeScript ESLint, follow James and me because we often tweet about it and you can get some good pro tips about it there. So yeah, that's just a quick answer there. But cool. Let's talk about this. So from what I understand, James, I'm going to try... You're welcome. I'm going to try to give a summary here and let me know how accurate this is. There is a pre-existing project in the JavaScript ecosystem called Lerna. Lerna was the original tool for JavaScript monorepos. It actually fell out of maintenance for a good period of time. Oh yeah, Adobe's mad at me. But I'll blur that out in the After Effects. But after Lerna declared that they didn't have time to maintain it, the maintainers were busy with other things, Narwhal, your company, actually took stewardship. So Lerna, if I understand correctly, is now maintained again. We don't have to worry about it. I'm just posting in the chat. And we on TypeScript ESLint use both Lerna and Nx. Lerna helps coordinate our builds, and Nx is what is kind of hollowing out the inside of Lerna for us. Can you speak more on like how that relationship works for us on TypeScript ESLint?
Yep. So I am actually personally the lead maintainer of Lerna through Narwhal. So it's an interesting. I didn't see that coming necessarily, but that is the situation. I've been using Lerna for a long time, and so anytime I set up some kind of open source repo over the last 5 years or whatever, I would use Lerna, and TypeScript ESLint was no different. When I set up TypeScript ESLint, I set it up with Lerna, and this was, again, many years before I had any personal involvement with Lerna whatsoever. But yes, because I worked with Narwhal, and Narwhal took over the Lerna project, rescued it basically, which was very important for the ecosystem, so that they knew they were in good hands. Victor Savkin, the CTO of Narwhal, requested that I make that my focus, and so that's what I've been doing. And we've landed some really important features. Essentially, Lerna started out life in 2015, beginning of 2016, as just the monorepo tooling necessary to make Babel work. It was made by the Babel team, and decided to spin it out into its own project. And so it gave it the name Lerna, created it as a new repo. But essentially, it was just a series of scripts and stuff in the Babel repo originally. But it became its own thing. Gradually evolved beyond the Babel team. But at that time, if you think about 2016, the package managers simply did not have support for monorepos. PNPM was a long way from existing. Yarn wasn't a thing yet because it was made by the same people that spun out Lerna. So yeah, Sebastian hadn't made Yarn yet, and NPM had no support for workspaces whatsoever. So Lerna originally needed to fill that complete void. So it had to do everything related to running a repo with multiple packages in it. And that meant it has an awful lot of stuff in it. Some of this stuff we are genuinely actively retiring in future versions. So there's this concept called Bootstrap, which basically does a load of sim linking of dependencies in your local workspace to make local dependencies resolvable through node modules. And that kind of stuff just simply isn't necessary in 2022, late 2022, because NPM, Yarn, and PNPM all have first-class support for workspaces. So there's a load of commands in Learner around package management that just simply isn't necessary, and dependency management that just isn't necessary. And so what we want to focus on is making the core differentiators for Learner the best they can possibly be. So for task running, that's the kind of thing we've solved already, if you like. With NX, we'd already built the best task runner in the industry, the fastest task runner in the industry, as it's benchmarked against all the others. And the intelligence around distributed task execution and remote caching and stuff, the combination of those features just simply does not exist anywhere else. And because we'd spent years battle testing this with enterprise clients, we were very confident it was going to be a genuine benefit for the Learner ecosystem if we could plug it in instead of Learner's existing implementation. So Learner historically has always delegated task running to something else. It was 2 different promise-based queue libraries made by Sindre. And basically NX is just the third outsourcing of that task running responsibility, but a much more robust one, a much more fully featured one. So that was one of the early efforts we did. And so now when you run task running with Learner, you get that same benefit of caching that I mentioned. And you can also do distributed task execution that I mentioned for free. Nothing has changed on the Learner side. You just do Learner run as you always have done for years. It just got magically faster. So that was super cool. But the main differentiator between Learner and NX, obviously NX has task running as well because it's literally the same backend. But the differentiator is Learner's versioning and publishing commands. So being able to take all your packages across your monorepo and say, I want to release version 12 of this now. And not only do you want to update the package JSON version fields, obviously you need to find all the dependencies and dev dependency references in all those package JSONs, update those. You want to probably generate changelog information automatically from your commit history. It deals with that. And then it will handle creating a GitHub release for you, pushing that information to GitHub, pushing it to NPM as the actual publishing. So all of that value that Learner has is unique. And so that's why even to this day, when we use NX to manage, if you like, the monorepo tasks, we still use Learner to handle versioning and publishing because it's still got unique value there. And hopefully it's going to get even more valuable because we have some really cool objectives for Learner v7 that we're working on around dry run, which has been a requested feature in Learner since 2016. And we're also going to be doing, if you look on the Learner repo, I've got a pinned issue for the v7 roadmap. But yeah, that is the original feature request. Yeah, Learner dry run. But yeah, sorry, it's a pinned issue which leads to a discussion. Sorry, 3410 is the discussion there. So yeah, dry run. So recoverable. Sorry, yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
Recoverable Learner publish is another big one. So if you have a flaky network connection, or if the npm registry goes down, and you're publishing 60 packages, like the Learner repo has 60 packages that it publishes, it can be really annoying if that happens in the middle of a publishing run and that exits your process and you have to recover from that. So we want that to be automatic, that you can recover, you can rerun Learner publishing and have it just sort of work. So that'll be super cool. A watch mode that's informed by the package graph at your workspace level is also something we're bringing to both NX and Learner. And as I mentioned, the transitioning of bootstrap and add and link and those kind of legacy commands, just to simplify everyone's mental model of Learner, the mental model of the code base. Like if we can retire some of these genuinely unneeded features, it will free us up to concentrate on making the features we do need the best they can be. So yeah, so V7 is super exciting. We'll be the next, like until May next year, probably we'll be working on these features as well as other things, but these are the kind of the headline features that we'll be working on. Cool. And again, this is all still valuable to TypeScript-ESLint. Like if we get publishing dry run and recoverable publishing, that will be hugely helpful for the TypeScript-ESLint project.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I love that.
that's why they will both continue to live in harmony. And now that Narwhal has taken the funding from the new year, I will have more time to dedicate to both TypeScript-ESLint and Learner, and I'm hugely excited for that, because right now I do a lot of consultancy work with clients. I don't necessarily have an awful lot of hours per week to work on open source beyond the minimum to keep the projects healthy. But so I'm very excited about the new year and having more time to dedicate to this stuff as well.
Great. So let's talk real quick then about what we could do more. I see we already have a lot of tasks set up with Nx. For example, if you were to run yarn build in our repo, it's already set up with nice caching. And actually, oh yeah, James, I'm sorry for springing this on you, but I've had this weird issue where there's some weird shenanigan with the cache where on multiple computers from scratch, if I set up the repo, I get this issue that is not valid. That there's you know what? Maybe this is just on our main branch that there's a TypeScript error. But anyway, I can see that 3 projects build successfully, and then a 4th one, which depended on at least one of these projects, has a TypeScript issue. So yeah, that's cool. Anyway, so I see we already have Nx set up for a bunch of stuff. What comes next? Like, what would we want to do to take on more Nx stuff?
Yeah, so it's TypeScript-ESLint is an interesting project when it comes to Nx, because obviously I have been contributing to Nx since its very early days,
drinking water is important, folks.
I don't expect people to necessarily understand everything about how to configure it, and Nx has got more and more flexible over time. To this mental model I described of an intelligent core, and then everything's plugin based. So you can run Nx and have it just work by building a graph of your project. So, for example, that's kind of a cool command. If you wouldn't mind just in the terminal running NX graph, it's one of the key features of this intelligent core. Oh, sorry, you maybe need npx or yarn, yeah. So that will open a browser window, and if you just go to show all projects on the left, it's the quickest way to just get something rendered. Ooh. This is what the dependency graph of the TypeScript-ESLint monorepo looks like. These are all of our packages and projects, and this is how they fit together. These are the dependencies between them. If you I'm lagging a bit on your Zoom, I think. So if you, for example, the node, we call the projects are nodes in the graph, and the arrows that go between them are edges on the graph. So if you go to the main graph in the middle, or even this is fine. If you just stop moving things for a second, so I can catch up to where you are. I just want to describe a very specific feature of the graph. So, yeah, if you look at this main view, if you hover over the you see on the left, TypeScript-ESLint website ESLint depends on TypeScript-ESLint TypeScript-ES3. There's an arrow that goes between them. That's what we would call an edge. So if you click on the arrow itself, this edge will tell you where that dependency was discovered. So here you can see there's a static dependency that was codified in the package JSON. So you can see here that we've been able to build a graph by saying there's a package JSON reference, either a dev dependency or a dependency that's been explicitly statically referenced between those two things. So that's one kind of edge that you get in your graph. Another kind of edge would be a static import or from TypeScript, because the NX core can scan your TypeScript files and find the imports and exports. So that's the kind of thing you would see in a repo that's building apps, for example, where you are importing libraries of source code and you're doing them from source, whereas obviously TypeScript-ESLint is a series of packages. So the dependencies it discovers are far more likely to come from package JSON files, because that's just how we specify those things. But that's kind of one of the interesting things about NX is there's these different types of workspaces that you see, and not all of them are the same. And particularly when you've got different contributors from different backgrounds, sometimes NX is almost like a spectrum that you want to dial up and dial down. So historically, I've not overly configured NX, if you like. I've not wanted it to be seen as a barrier to contribution or anything like that. And Brad didn't have any background with NX or anything. So NX is capable of those targets I mentioned of test, lint, build. NX is capable of inferring those things from your npm scripts. So if you have an npm script called test, you can run that with NX test. But there is a slightly more powerful way to configure those things. So yeah, all of these scripts would show up in NX as if you go to a particular, this is the root package JSON, but if you go to a particular package within it, so the ES tree or whatever, in the type, so this project is called TypeScript-ESLint, TypeScript-ES-tree. This has a load of scripts. So any of these could be run with like NX test, TypeScript-ESLint, TypeScript-ES-tree, for example. You could run that way. But obviously you could also run it by saying, well, that would be reciprocal. You'd be in an infinite loop of running test would run test would. But so the great thing is, this is standard, obviously. This is just npm scripts. Anybody understands how these work, but NX can layer some stuff on top. A slightly more powerful approach, because obviously all you can do in an npm script is have a string of a command you want to run. That's not that expressive. You can't express anything there about outputs that it's going to write to disk, or any inputs that are relevant for a cache computation, or like any of that kind of stuff. If you want to actually be like more intelligent around these targets, you need more expressiveness than just a single string entry. And so NX has the concept of project configuration in a project JSON file. You can also put it in your package JSON under a special NX namespace, but it's kind of easier to manage when it's in a project JSON file. So we do have project JSON files, but they're much more lightweight than maybe I would have done, for example, as an experienced NX contributor. I might have generated those by default instead of having npm scripts. As you can see here, we do have a precedent here where we've wanted to be a bit more expressive with our lint. So we've used the built-in narwhal linter plugin. It has an ESLint executor. And so we've wired that up. So now when you run nxlint for this project, you will run the executor. It's capable of saying where it outputs things on disk. So in the case of linting, it might be a lint report that it writes to disk. That could then be cached because NX can read the outputs configuration and knows where it goes, things like that. You can just be much more expressive with this JSON configuration than you could ever be with a single string. One thing we've done in this particular case where we've moved the config for what it means to run lint to the project JSON, we've then put the alias, as Josh was typing before, we've put an alias, so we've kept the best of both worlds. So as you can see, line 40, if you run lint as an npm script, you will actually be invoking nxlint, which will discover, oh, I'm in this project. So I'll look up in the project JSON, aha, this is what it means to run lint. And again, the core is intelligent but generic. It doesn't know what linting means. It just knows how to resolve a target name of lint in a configuration file. So obviously right now you can see we're running Jest in kind of like a naked way, if you like. There's no NX machinery there, but NX could still invoke this because it can understand npm scripts. But if we wanted to, we could set up a test target in that same project JSON file, and we could use the narwhal Jest plugin. Yeah, again, you're reciprocal here because it's not been given any meaning in the project JSON file. So if we were to introduce a target here, the most basic kind of target you can do is if you make the executor nx colon, we'll just start with a basic one. If you just make it nx colon run dash commands, you can get rid of line 15 entirely because we won't have any outputs. And then if you change lint file patterns to be commands instead, and now your string there is actually just a shell command. It's just any kind of command you want to run. So for example, we could write the exact same jest dash coverage or whatever it was before in that space where you currently have the old path reference that's in there, the glob reference. So if you change line 16 to be jest and dash coverage, I think it was, but it doesn't really matter. But now what we've done in the most basic way possible is move to a more expressive configuration, but we're still invoking the same things. It's possible you might need MPX or yarn to resolve the jest in there. Oh, no, you don't. Okay, fine. So we've done exactly the same thing as we had before, but now we could evolve this even more if we wanted to, because instead of running the jest CLI in a child process, Narwhal has a built-in Narwhal jest plugin that we can use, and we could wire up the configuration options that are specific to that executor that would allow us to configure, whatever we want to with that. So this is what I mean by Nx is a spectrum. You can start off with just npm scripts and no project JSON configuration needed at all. You could evolve that to be run commands executor, where you're running these shell commands, but you're delegating it and you can be a bit more expressive. And then you can dial it up even further, and you can have a plugin, which instead of running a CLI tool via wrapping, you can run that same thing using a dedicated executor that's been built for it. So that will be using Jest programmatically, the Node API of Jest instead. And so, that's what I mean by it kind of being a spectrum.
Awesome. I really like this. Thanks. This is clicking for me that we don't have to use it. If we do use it, we could just run the exact same command we were running before, or we could use some sort of dedicated executor. What I'd like to do is, because we've seen the test execute, or just the run command executor run test well, is I want to find docs on how do I use this Narwhal jest package, and I'm failing to find them on the website.
Oh, sorry, I thought you just saw it. If you go scroll back up to the top, the first thing that you need to do is oh, that's strange. What is I get it. So it's telling you by default, if you generated a web app, you would get Jest. So it's an interesting emphasis of the docs there. You're starting from adding Jest to an existing project. This is what you want. So you need to first install the dependency. If we don't already have it in the package JSON, which we may not do, because we haven't been using it to date, I don't think. We need to first add the Narwhal Jest package. And as you can see, there's then a generator, which will allow you to add it to your project programmatically without you having to do all the manual JSON construction yourself, which is a nice feature.
Got it.
So that's the NXG is short for NX generate, and then Narwhal Jest is the plugin that's being referenced, and then the colon says there's a namespace, and then Jest project is the name of the generator we're going to run. And so you'd want to run this from the root. So one thing about Nx is normally it's your control center from the root of the workspace. So you don't need to CD into these locations. You'd usually be running Nx from the root.
I like CDing though.
The alternative to CDing, you're giving the project name, and that's how it would find it instead.
Okay.
So you've already got a test. So just rename test to old test or something like that. Exactly.
Got it.
So now instead, we've generated for ourselves the configuration, which includes the Narwhal Jest plugin and the Narwhal Jest executor. As you can see, it's installing some stuff for you because it's probably discovered that we don't have certain Jest types or Jest utilities that it wants to have by default. So we don't have to keep those things, but it's going to install them by default for you. It's going to wire up the NX approach to Jest, basically. So this is why I didn't install this before now, because obviously it's the NX approach. This is the opinionated side of NX that you do not have to use ever, as clearly evidenced by TypeScript-ESLint. But you kind of, if you want to opt into it and if you want to outsource those kind of decisions to a very experienced, hardworking dev team at Narwhal that figures out how these tools should fit together in a scalable way, you can do that. You can just say, you figure this out, I'll use your blessed configuration that you've decided upon. And that is a perfectly valid approach. But if you want to handcraft your Jest setup, as evidenced by TypeScript-ESLint, you absolutely can do and still get the benefits of NX's caching. So
cool. How do I run tests for just TypeScript-ES3?
So there's two ways of doing it. Either you do the short form, which is something you do NX test project name, or the long form is NX run project name : target name, which is test in this case. So you can always use both forms. So as you can see, even when you ran NX test project name, what it actually printed for you just after that was NX run project : target name. So that's the the underlying long form, but it's usually slightly quicker to write NX target name project name instead. So
Got it.
yeah, they're
Cool.
both exactly the same.
Awesome. Thank you. So I see that there's going to be some configuration. Oh, you know what? I disagree with how your tests are set up by default. It looks like the tests are set up to fail on TypeScript type errors. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely.
Ooh, I have an opinion on that one, and the opinion is to not do that. But it's informed only by the small amount of projects I've worked on, and I imagine
Yeah.
y'all might have harder amounts of or larger amounts of data to back up your decision there.
It certainly wasn't something I was personally involved in, but I'm so used to it that I wouldn't have even considered not having it, to be honest. So one thing I'm going to get you to do, which is definitely useful for people to see. Obviously, so far you've been asking me questions like, how do I do run? And I was showing you a generate command. The best thing is none of us want to memorize these things. Sometimes you accidentally memorize them when you've worked on it for years and years, like I have. But most people shouldn't need to memorize these commands. And they don't need to, because if you go to your extensions in VS Code, we have a dedicated extension called Nx console. So if you search for that one, it's invaluable to have installed. As you can see, we've got 1.1 million downloads for that. Super useful extension. Anybody that uses NX should have that installed. I'm not
Cool.
sure.
I'm going to add it
Doesn't
to our
seem.
workspace recommendations.
Oh yeah, definitely. If it's not already in there, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So if you, I don't know if you need to reload your VS Code just so it can discover the workspace. Not sure.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt.
So now, if you go back to that project JSON file we were looking at, now
It's
what
got
you'll
the little
see
line breaks
is
here.
NX console is now inserting a clickable link to run that target for you. So obviously we've broken our
That's so
naked
cool.
usage of Jest because we've added all kinds of configuration that we didn't have before. But the point, you could run the lint, for example, the existing command that was already in there, and that should still pass. And like, oh, actually, if we've got type errors, we've got type errors. So that's, yes, it's all going to fail. But yeah, so you don't even need to remember the syntax for running things because NX console will overlay a clickable target for you, which, as you can see, spawns a little extra task running terminal here, and yeah, super useful. So that's one thing it will do. It will overlay that into your configuration files. Yeah, so we've got new files and stuff all over the place. So
Yeah.
we're in a bit of a
But
wonky
it
state.
works. Like from
Yeah,
that next perspective,
exactly.
everything is working perfectly. We asked it to lint and it linted. This is great.
Exactly. So the other thing that it does, as well as overlaying things in your configuration files and making it trivial it does autocomplete. So if, for example, I got you to write nx:\run-commands, if you try and add more stuff in your project JSON, it will autocomplete all of that configuration. No, sorry, I meant in the configuration of the project JSON. We had the executor. If you remember, we typed.
Let's see. So we had the executor.
Yeah, you typed that by hand. Nx. If you get rid of that string now, and you start typing n, now you can see it's going to pre-populate the available from schema JSON data that's read behind the scenes. So you don't need to remember all of these things off by heart. These are the available plugins that exist in your workspace and the available executors that live inside those plugins. That's what the NX console is overlaying for you, auto-completing those values. The same goes for if you have project references. So implicit dependencies, for example, on line 4, that's how we specify project relationships that aren't statically inferable. They can only be said by an author who knows some extra relationships that exist between them. If you were to start typing inside that array, NX console will provide you autocomplete for your project names as well. On line 4.
Cool.
Yeah, so yeah, that you will get autocomplete. So the bang syntax will say don't depend on this thing, and without the bang, it will depend on it. So as you can see, it's even giving you a hint describing what it does.
Cool. So what I want to see is now you've mentioned we have these implicit dependencies explicitly mentioned. So where is types? I'm trying to. How do I see the arrow to types from here? I just want to
so if
show
you click on TypeScript-ESLint, if you just move away from that, if you click on that and you do focus, does that one? Oh, sorry, because it's in the middle of so many things. That is what the focused view looks like. Okay, so if you go on types and go on focus, yeah, there you go. So now you can see the one of the arrows
Implicit.
has the word implicit written on it, and so that's that
Cool.
relationship there.
Awesome. I feel actually really good about this. I feel like I know what to do. I also have three things that I'm gonna now bring up as suggestions. One is feature request for Nx detect infinite loops and yell at user about it, because that was really funny to me. For example, that.
Yeah, that's fair
Another
enough.
is
That's the kind of stuff you only do when you like give the keys to, like, you give the wheel to somebody else and they just play with
yeah,
stuff. And it's the kind of thing when you build a task runner, you don't think, what if somebody yeah, it's
yeah.
kind of funny.
Um, Yeah, I'm going to bring this up as a discussion in the NX repo or issue or some sort. Just type checking by default is useful because sometimes people only test; they don't also build separately. But type checking slows your tests down because TypeScript's type checking is a thing that has to take time. And the last thing I'm going to bring up is you're downgrading us. We were on just 29. What happened?
Yeah, so I raised this personally. We have one of the generator functions, like, that manages your interactions with your package JSON. I think it's just a feature request basically to make that be smarter. For example, behind the scenes when we have the jest, as I told you, we work on making sure all these packages work together. So we know that a certain version of jest is fully working, and so that will be specified in the generator behind the scenes. Jest 28 works. There isn't logic in there, I don't think, right now to say if you're at least 28, try 20. Like, obviously this is particularly difficult because it crosses a major version boundary. But even if it hadn't crossed a major version boundary, NX would have stamped its blessed version in there for you, even if it was just changing a patch version or something. So yeah, it's debatable about whether that behavior should be made smarter or tweaked in some way. Just 28 versus 29, that's maybe a bit more controversial because that is a difference in major version. So I'm not sure if we could support multiple major versions. But part of the reason why this is 28 and not 29 is because we're not actually on the latest major version of NX right now. We're on version 14 instead of version 15. So that was going to be one thing I wanted to run through with you on the call if you want to do an upgrade, because what's one of the coolest features of NX, in my opinion.
Yeah, let me just write down what we've done so far. To do post command we use to generate. Yeah, so you're about to tell me that we've got some sort of fancy like NX generator automatically upgrade me to the next version.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think
Let's
we'll
do
need
it.
to get rid of all of our work in progress because we've messed things up royally now. I think we'll want to clear this out and make sure we're starting from a clean slate. So you'll probably want to do a yarn as well, just to make sure we've got the packages from the main branch that we expect. While that's running, if you click on the NX console icon, it's not just going to do stuff to your config files. Oh, what's happened there with the failure?
Oh, I need to bring this up on
Oh,
the
yeah.
repo. We have a build failure on main. Somehow slipped in there.
Okay, yeah. So as you can see, it's not just stuff overlaid in your configuration files. It has some interactive stuff in this sidebar as well. So it will show you a list of your projects, and you can jump to the configuration files. That you see that little page icon with an arrow curling onto it on the right. If you click on that, it will jump you to the package.json file. As you can see, it's also read your targets from the package.json and printed them there. So build, clean, post clean. Those are clickable targets there as well on the left in the sidebar. So it's read the package.json of AST spec, and it's combined that with the project JSON. And so if you wanted to run build AST spec, you could click it in the sidebar, and you don't even need to visit the configuration file. You can just run that target directly there. So again, NX console saves you from memorizing commands, and it's super useful because you can just discover them organically in a logical way by just knowing which project you care about. NX console, hugely powerful, multiple features we haven't even covered on this call, but I think we should do migrate before we finish. NX console, definitely install
Let's
it if you
do
use
it.
NX. Okay, so to be honest, I have never run migrate by clicking it from NX console, but sure. So what NX migrate will do, oh, interesting. Yeah, I was going to say you need to give migrate a version, so I didn't understand how that was going to possibly work. Seems like it doesn't. I'll report that to Jonathan, who maintains that. So instead, let's run it in the command line because this is where I'm comfortable with this anyway. So if you run yarn nx migrate latest, that will tell NX to go to the npm registry and look up what is the latest version of NX. You can give an exact version, semver version in there if you want to, but I was obviously just use latest. So it will find that version on the repo. It will bring all those packages down, and it will get things ready for you to run some migrations if applicable. So the first thing it's going to do is update those versions. If it detects that between your current version and the version you're migrating to, that things have changed in a way that requires code migrations to run, code mods you might know them as, it will print a migrations JSON file, and then it will leave you a gap to review. So we can look at our package JSON right now, and we can see the packages that NX has updated for us, but it hasn't yet run an install. That's really important. These are the changes that NX wants to make, basically. So we can, at this moment, intercept any of these changes and adjust them if we want to. NX hasn't done that yet. So again, because NX is serializing the package JSON, reading it, reserializing it, it looks like our funky usage of comment, like our cheeky usage of comments, which aren't really supported here, are being lost. Because I think we're using // in two places, right? So the key is not unique.
Yeah.
Is that right? So that's probably why
correct.
one's being stripped. They're being combined into one. So that'll be why, because
Yeah,
it's being serialized. It's being deserialized and reserialized, and obviously it's being turned from a string to an object and back and forth. So that stuff will be lost as soon as it gets turned into a JavaScript object. So that's why that will be happening.
This is actually an issue that I found on the TSLint to ESLint config package. I'll bring that up real quick, where there's no good package that I could find that with low amounts of configuration lets you do JSON diff patching. There is a literal JSON diff patch project, but it's not intended for times when you have invalid JSON or comments.
Right.
Yeah, here we go. So if anyone wants to tackle this issue from a very long time ago, please do. But anyway, please continue the NX.
So that's been a really good thing. That's a good example of what I mean. So for our specific use case, for our specific repo, we have a concern that we care about, that we need to kind of handcraft. And that's always going to be the case. NX, any tool that wants to do automated stuff for you, there's always going to be edge cases that your Snowflake repo has that's unique to it and you care about and nobody at scale cares about, but it matters to you. That's absolutely fine. And NX embraces that by giving you this gap. Most tools that do any kind of automated move from A to B just do it. And then you're like, oh, it broke in these weird, unexpected ways. What happened? I'll try and dig through some logs. NX separates what is going to happen from actually making it happen. And that is, believe me, as somebody who's worked with migration tools from the Angular ecosystem for a long time, that is a huge benefit. So not only can we see the changes on the package JSON before any installs have been run, and we can adjust them. So we can fix that comment issue. I think you already did, didn't you? So we can fix that. That's specific to us, but we can fix it so that it makes sense for us. If, for example, like the issue you saw around jest version, maybe it tweaked a version of a package we know we need or something like that. This would be the moment we could adjust it, and no install has happened yet. The other thing it does is, if relevant, for the plugins we have in our specific workspace. As you can see, we have very few plugins. We only have the workspace plugin right now. We don't have Narwhal, Jest, Narwhal, Angular, Narwhal, whatever. So there's less likely to be sources of migrations. But even for the core usage that we have Narwhal workspace, so we have some core migrations. If migrations are relevant, NX will generate a migrations JSON file. If they're not relevant, there will be no migrations JSON file, and you're nearly done. All you need to do is run a yarn install in this case. But for us, we do have a migrations JSON that's been generated, so we can now look at that file. And again, before anything has happened, we can review what NX wants to do to our repo. And in 99% of cases, it's just a case of running what NX wants to do. But in some cases, for example, maybe a migration isn't applicable to us, or maybe a migration, when you run it, just breaks for some reason. Again, 99% of the case, that's not applicable. But in the 1% of cases where it does crop up, if you don't have this functionality of this separation of concerns, it's a nightmare to run most migrations, but not all. Or even you could reorder these in the list. They will run in order in this array. Again, almost never relevant, but if it did need to be, you could switch the order of these around before running anything. So
Cool.
in this particular case, we can see implicit dependencies is being enhanced with a new feature called named inputs and target inputs. So it's going to do some rewriting of configuration for us. So as the tool NX evolves, as the NX team puts in new features, it can be kind of hard to keep up. Any fast-moving open source project, if new features going, it can be hard to keep up.
Yeah.
You kind of don't need to keep up, because NX migrates itself to the latest and greatest configuration for you. And that's what these migrations here are going to do. NX has invented some new concepts here to make configuration easier to manage and more powerful by having inputs to the caching logic. It's going to help us create that configuration now. So when you run this follow-up command that you copied from the output of the first command, it will read that migrations JSON and actually run these migrations. So yeah, if you go ahead and run that whenever you want, we'll see that. So a migration, by the way, is just a special kind of generator. It's a generator is essentially just a function that runs on a virtualized version of your file tree. Instead of writing things to disk and reading from disk directly, it manipulates a tree and then flushes the changes of the tree to disk at the end. A migration is just a special kind of generator that does the same thing. We have a post install that obviously runs the build. So if you do yarn ignore scripts instead of yarn, or you just remove the post install script for now from this, because actually NX will probably run yarn itself. So I think we might need to, if you remember my PR, I added. Oh yeah, I've already added it. Yes, if you do skip post install as an environment variable, if you do skip post install true, and then run yarn. Yeah, sorry, I already added this. That was the reason I needed to add this, was so that we didn't have to run the build when we do the automated powered one in CI. So if you now run your NX, the NX command, the run migrations one.
Yeah. It is really annoying having a build failure on me. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
Merge conflict or something.
Let's blame Brad because he's not here.
Come on, Brad. I used to have a.
So as you can see in the output here, it tells you the files that it updated as it ran through the migrations in the terminal output. But obviously, we can also just inspect them. So one thing NX has done now is it's transitioned to ensuring that every project JSON has a name field. Before, the name field had to come from a workspace JSON file at the root, but the workspace JSON file is now entirely optional because all of the metadata you'd need about a project is now specified in the project JSON file itself. So you can actually delete the workspace JSON at this point if we wanted to. We don't have to. There's no downside to having it, but we could at this point delete it. And another thing it's done, as you can see here, any references we've got to the directory structure of the project in question, that can be turned into our special syntax of braces project root, because it matches that. So anywhere in outputs, if you have a project root reference, that can be swapped out. So again, these are nice to have configuration updates that NX is just keeping us up to date with the latest and greatest automatically through these migrations. And again, if you're unhappy with them, NX has not forced you to commit them. You could revert some of them, you could change them, you could do whatever, but it's nice to have the tooling do most of the legwork for you, migrating a code base.
Yeah, for sure. I like this. I like this a lot.
So the thing that the skip post install came from was me setting up a GitHub action to update us automatically when Renovate tells us that Narwhal workspace has been updated. So to be honest, this has flagged up to me. Why hasn't that happened in the interim? Do we have something wrong with our Renovate config maybe? Like, why haven't we received a PR that updated Narwhal workspace? So that's a good follow-up for me, is to figure out why. Wait, Where's any recent renovate PRs?
It hasn't been running. That's right. I normally just tune them out and then like once in a while go through them. But yeah, we haven't seen anything from renovate.
That doesn't seem good. I can see one was merged 11 days ago. Was that the most recent one? Renovate bot.
Oh my god. Why is...
Yeah, there's none open, which is incredibly surprising. Oh, one was merged 5 days ago. Actually, it was the most recent one.
Is it just being slow? I don't even have access. Okay, well that's a follow-up for some other time. Let me just.
No, I know why. It's because the Narwhal 15 major version renovate PR had already happened before we landed my PR. So when we closed that PR, renovate has taken that as the instruction. Ignore version 15, and version 15 is the version we care about. That's what's happened. Yeah. So we need to re-instruct renovate. Again, it's a follow-up for me. I'll re-instruct renovate to stop ignoring version 15 patches of NX. That's why that's happened.
Well, wait. If we update to version 15, will it resume?
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good instigator for us to do this then. So, all right. So I've got the migrations done. The workspace is up to date.
Yep.
There were very
so
few
at this
other than
point now,
names.
because you've run all your migrations, you delete migrations JSON. That's normally what you would do at this point. You would just migrations JSON has served its purpose. If it's needed again, it will be recreated by a future upgrade. But it no longer serves any purpose. The only reason why you might want to commit a migrations JSON is, again, if you had 1,500 migrations to run and you just couldn't fit them all, like it didn't make sense to do them in one PR. You wanted to split them over multiple PRs or something like that. It's the only reason why you might commit the migrations JSON file.
Got it. So I'm just going to...
And yeah, the workspace JSON, removing that is optional, but again, you've done it. It's absolutely fine to do it at this point, now that the name fields are in there, so everything should just work fine. It's one less. Oh, awesome. You committed your change to post install. We didn't want to do that.
Yep. You're totally correct. Oopity poopity. Git commit amends. No, I will add a co-author on this when I get to the PR. By the way, does it work if you do co-authored by and then just the GitHub username? I don't know if that should be
never tried.
Stuff.
Never tried. Yeah, never tried.
Let's see what happens. I've been doing it once in a while. Alright, you know what? I'm just gonna make this a draft and then I'll file issues separately because this issue is just for setting up a plan. Alright, so now we get to see what's gonna happen. But great, I feel really good about this. I feel like we've got a good plan where it's gonna be one bump to the latest version of NX2, move all our commands to NX run commands, and then 3 migrate.
So I gave that as an example. I wouldn't say that you don't necessarily gain any value from that middle transition step. We can either stick with npm scripts, or we would jump to dedicated plugins. I was mainly using that as like an educational. If there's a mental gap between an npm script and an executor, this whole new word that you have to learn, I just wanted to bridge that gap by saying an executor is just a function that runs something, and it can be as simple as just a shell command. So I gave the example of run commands as like a middle step. And if you ever find yourself running something that doesn't have a plugin for it, then you would reach for run commands. Let's say it's some I don't know, some view serve, like I can't think of any examples that would be popular but not have a plugin. It's more likely it'd be an unpopular thing, like it's something that you've created, or it's a dev tool that's just brand new. Maybe Rome, let's say. Rome doesn't have an official plugin for it. Maybe at this point it has a community plugin, who knows? But if you wanted to run Rome, you'd have to run its CLI, so you could wrap that in a run commands executor. But if there's already a plugin for something, you probably want to use the plugin, or you just don't want to bother with the project JSON configuration. You just want to use your package JSON scripts.
Cool. That
Yeah,
sounds great.
I'm glad you raised that, because that may well have been unclear. It's not some requisite 1, 2, 3 that you have to go through. It was just a teaching 1, 2, 3 of mental model switch. That's all.
Awesome. Remind me, we ran 2 commands here. Just do you know off the top of your head what did we do to generate the narwhal jest plugin usage?
Yeah, so the only one you actually need to remember is Nx migrate latest, and because Nx migrate latest prints the second command that you run as the follow-up. It tells you now run this.
Got
So
it.
the only one you actually need to remember is Nx migrate latest.
I meant for the jest plugin. What did we do? I guess it's on the docs. I can just look at the docs here.
Oh yeah, it's just we just npm installed the plugin, and then we ran the generator which added the project configuration. But again, yes. If you just quickly go back to your editor,
you're about to show me something cool, aren't you?
The NX console extension doesn't only help you run tasks, it also helps you run generators. So if you go to if you click on the narwhal, the NX console icon on the left, you can see right at the top there's generate. Sorry, not at the top. That's the projects. I mean the top of the generate and run target. If you click on generate, it will give you a command prompt for all of the plugins that are installed. So if you search for Jest, oh no, actually we didn't install Jest in the end, did we? So once you've installed Narwhal Jest, it will populate that list with. So as you can see, it populated with the ones we do have installed. So we have Narwhal Workspace, but any of the plugins you have installed in your repo will be in there.
Got it. Which actually reminds me, we have @narwhal/linter as the executor for a bunch of packages, but we don't have it explicitly installed. We don't need to.
Yeah, that's true. That in that particular case, it's because Narwhal Workspace depends on Narwhal linter. I think that's the reason why it's. So we could specify it directly in the package JSON. Maybe we should for maximum clarity.
Yeah, I'll just add that to the list. And
funnily enough, I don't think NX, when it generates a new workspace that goes like full NX mode, I don't think it bothers to specify linter in the like direct dependencies because it's just always the present. Oh. But yeah, there's no harm. They're all versioned in lockstep anyway, so they're all identical.
Okay,
so.
And it already shows up in generate, so yeah. Fine. Yep.
So you would do now you could search for Jest when you click on generate, and that exact same Jest-project one would show up. Sorry, maybe you do need to reload the window after that.
And it's not showing up. But I also have the build failure, so I don't know if that did anything.
I don't think so.
It did install.
Shouldn't do.
Yeah,
you ran Narwhal linter install. Did you run the Narwhal Jest install?
I thought I did. Let's go.
I thought you did as well. That's weird.
Yeah, it's there.
Huh.
Do I? Is it cached? Do I refresh? Nope.
That's very strange. I mean, obviously, I don't know how the NX console resolves exactly what you've got installed. Maybe it's struggling to find the new reference somehow. You reloaded the window once already, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Can I go to extensions and restart NX specifically, maybe? Where is it? Why do I have it?
Sure.
Get out of here. All right. This is the reload, right? This extension is synced. That's not a reload.
No, I'm not sure there is a reload specific for that. Yeah, I don't know.
I saw a refresh icon, got excited. Well, anyway, we know the command anyway, so I guess a bug for you and yours.
Yeah, I don't know much about the internals of the VS Code extension, to be honest.
Cool, but I'm just going to go ahead and run this.
Yeah, you can certainly run that at any point, but that's, I don't know why that generator's not showing up. It's very strange.
All right, so now that we're on version 15 of NX, it's likely that it'll keep us. Oh my God, look at this. Oh, sorry, I saw the 10 to 28 and didn't notice that it's a different version. Okay.
Yeah, no, the jest thing is a much bigger change. It will need its own PR to figure out, like, we'll have to reconcile a totally different global jest configuration than the one we have today. So it will need to be its own dedicated work stream to figure out if it's valuable for us or not.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, our goal here was to set up a plan and not to actually execute the plan. No pun intended. So I feel good about this. Is there anything?
Yeah. Well,
else
we did the migration, so
that's
really good. That's really valuable to be on the latest. So.
Yeah. Anything else we should look at?
As you can see there, the NX Cloud, one of its functionalities is it leaves a comment on your PR when it runs. So when the thing is finished running, it will show the different targets that were run. So building, testing, linting, whatever's being run through NX, it will show those there when it's done, and it will keep that comment up to date automatically as well. So it's a nice extra feature. So yeah, you can see it ran 47 targets in that case. So we namespaced them by node version just so we were clear on which one. And if you click on one of those, it jumps you straight to the NX Cloud UI, which has captured the standard output. So instead of you having to traipse through, because obviously one of the downsides when you run all this stuff in parallel, all your logs in GitHub are interleaved, and it's very hard to grok what's been happening. Whereas as you see here, you've jumped straight to NX test ESLint plugin. If you scroll down, you can see the captured output just from that one project and one target combination. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page on the NX Cloud, you can see if you click on that and expand it, you see just the output exactly how you would have seen it if you'd run only that task by itself. It's not mixed in with anything else. So that can be much more useful to browse versus the raw CI logs of everything together. Obviously, especially if something fails. If something succeeds, you usually don't want to look at it, which is why we collapse the comment on GitHub Actions, on the GitHub pull request by default. It's only if something fails. If something fails, it says like front and center, this target failed. Whereas on the ones where everything succeeded, it just collapses them into this many things ran successfully. So.
Yeah, I want to see if there's an example anywhere in ours. Failing PR where the task fails. I think this one is PR I need to work on. There we go. Yep. Failed commands.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, again, clickable. You navigates you straight there, and you can have a look at the failed output on NX Cloud to figure out what went on.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm smiling and satisfied. This was a lot of fun. Thanks, James. Anything else?
Thanks for having me.
Sign out that you want to poke at?
No, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for, talking through this stuff. It's obviously something where you spend a lot of time in it, and you get the value, and the value that one of the things about NX, the value compounds. The more you learn about it, the more you use it. You can stack all these concepts together, like these generator concepts, these executor concepts. They're very generic, and you can plug in your own ideas. But obviously, when you spend a while doing that, it's important to come back and be like, how would I explain this from first principles? How can I talk this through to somebody who hasn't seen it before? So it's hugely valuable. As we've seen on this call, we've seen some areas where maybe I took something for granted, or maybe I didn't know something didn't work that way, and that can happen, obviously. So it's very valuable to go through this process. And thanks for all your hard work on TypeScript-ESLint as well. It wouldn't be where it is without you. So it's
thanks, James.
It's a great like it was one of the things I'm most proud of in my dev career, I'd say as well. It's, as I say, it started out as just, well, I don't want to change linter. Basically, it was like a stubborn defiance that I wanted to use TypeScript, but I didn't want to change linter. I never envisaged it could grow to such a large community, to have so many people actively involved. And yeah, it's just so cool. It's so cool to have I think it's a very healthy project as well. Like we're kind to contributors. I think we do quite a good job. We're clear with communication. Obviously we can do better, and we're trying to do better. But yeah, I'm very, very proud of what we've been able to achieve together. So yeah, thanks for highlighting it on a stream on a regular basis. I know you do a lot of your streams focus on it as well, don't they? So I think it's really good.
Yeah, one thing that I've been trying to figure out, I haven't had the time to really dive into this, but I want to see like how we've changed over time. And selfishly, I want to see how my activity or contributions or community have helped improve things. So you can see that we've been a sustained project for ages now. Like we've really had a lot of stuff
Yep.
going on over the last couple of years. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
Slightly increased number of issues created. I'm pretty sure that's my fault because I've just been complaining. I want docs for this. I want docs for that. Yeah. But cool. Thanks, James. I posted your contact information, Twitter, and your blog, as well as nx.dev. Is there anything else I should post about you and or NX?
No, nx.dev. Like I say, it's a really good resource. It's been something again that certain folks on the team are very focused on improving all the time. Learner is hopefully going to get stronger and stronger now that we're taking over stewardship of it. The story between them hopefully gets stronger and stronger. I hope to produce a lot more content in 2023. I used to do content production, but I've not really been doing it for quite a number of years. And I hope to learn from people like Josh to get better at it. And the streaming format is quite intimidating for me. So people were asking questions about open source contributions. For me, I'm not used to this format of like a free form stream where we do some stuff. So it's really nice to be able to join in and dip my toe in the water. So at some point, I'll come on one of these things and I'll plug my own stream or something like that on my own YouTube channel. But for now, just make sure you follow Josh and you keep up to date with what he's doing. And I'm sure I'll be back on another Josh stream.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start a raid. It happens in 10 seconds. So we're going to go raid James Q Quick's channel because James and Amy Self-Teach Me are fantastic. So thanks y'all for watching. I'm going to have this up on YouTube soon. And what James said, like and subscribe, as they say. Bye, everyone.
See ya.